Hi, welcome to the tutorial on splitting of data into train and test datasets. By the end of this topic, you will be able to separate the independent and dependent variables, explain what is a train data and what is test data and why do we need them, split the dataset into train and test data. So we have reached the penultimate stage of our data processing for modeling, and we are just a few steps away before we start building the model. Okay, now we will be separating out the dependent and the independent variables from a dataset, and we will be renaming them as y and x respectively. So, y will include our dependent variable, that is the sale price, and x will include the independent variable in the dataset. We will be using the ilog function for defining the variables. So let's define them using Python. Since sale price is the first column, hence the column index is 0. And x will include rest of the 30 variables going from index 1 to 31. So let's check the first 5 records for x. You will notice that although we have taken the range from index 1 to 31, x will have 30 columns and not 31. Confused, right? Well, let's explain it to you. In ilog function, when we use the range, the last index is not considered, but the penultimate index is considered. For example, when we write the function transform housing data to dot ilog colon 1 ratio 21, here we will be getting 20 columns as we will consider the index from 1 till 20 only. Similarly, we will have 30 variables for x as the range would be considered from index 1 till 30. So we have now separated dependent and independent variables from our dataset. Now, the next step is to split our data into train and test datasets, and it is a very important step, as this will create the foundation for building our model. In supervised machine learning, we educate or train our model using the train data and then examine the model performance using the test data. Now, what is train dataset? When we build a model, we use some data on which we build the model, and such data is called training data. This is the data which is used by the model to learn. In this case, the output is known and the model learns to predict from these data points. For example, before your board examination, you learn from question banks or previous year questions so that you perform better in your board exams. Similarly, the models are trained using the train data, which is a subset of the actual data and consists of major portion of the data. Now we have understood what train data is. Let's move on to test data. Once we have trained our model, we examine the model as to how well it has learned using another subset of the original data. The dataset is called test data. In this case, we tell the model to predict the target variable values for the test data, and then we compare the predicted values with actual values and check as to how many of them were correctly predicted. Just like you learn from those question banks and appear for your board exams, and the marks you scored tell your performance. The test data consists of the remaining smaller portion of the actual data. Now that we have understood what train and test datasets are, let us now split the data into train and test datasets. We will be keeping 70% of the data as our train data and rest 30% as our test data. The ratio of these percentages is called as the split ratio, which changes based on the size of the datasets and the problem statements. Ideally, we split the data in 70-30 ratio. For splitting the data, we will be using the sklearn.model selection library. Now let's import that library. Let's split the dataset now. So we will be having two new sets for X and Y each. X will be split into X train and X test, and Y will be split into Y train and Y test based on 70-30 ratio. Let's check the code for the same. Press Ctrl and Enter, and we have successfully split our data. Let's check now the records in X train and X test. We use the shape function for finding out the dimensions of the table. Let's see. So X underscore train has 15,126 records and X underscore test has 6,483 records with 30 columns in each of them. Let us check the dimensions for Y underscore train and Y underscore test as well. Okay, now we are just one step away before we start building the model, and that will be covered in the next section. So that's it in this tutorial. See you in the next one.